Hello and welcome to the Elevate Data Show, episode number 22. Yay, 22. We are here to explore current topics in data visualization, share our creative inspiration, and the tools and techniques that we're experimenting with as practicing information designers. And today is a very special episode. We are hosting an AMA, Ask Me Anything, with our very own Gabrielle Merite. Yay! Applause, spotlight.
Yay! Hello. No pressure.
So Gabby's doing a lot of things, a lot of interesting things right now. Notably launching her own DataViz agency. She's hosting a newsletter about what we can learn about DataViz from research called Effect Affect with Eli Holder, and implementing style guides and design systems for lots of companies around the globe. Is that fair to say? Around the globe? Around the country, at least. I'll say country.
I'll take it.
So many things. So we're going to talk to her about what she's currently working on, where she sees herself going in the future, how she balances it all. I think that's an important question. I am Allie Torben. We also have Duncan Gear, as we mentioned, Gabrielle Merite, and Will Chase. And before we jump in, the show is supported by members of the Elevate DataViz learning community who get the opportunity to watch and ask questions live. So if you would like to do that, and you want to level up your DataViz skills in a supportive, so nice community, you can check out elevatedataviz.com. So we see that there's some people online now, so feel free to drop in the chat if you have any questions for Gabby, and we will definitely get to that. I think, Gabby, the first question I would like to ask, this was inspired by Sophie, dropped this question in Slack. All the things that you're doing, how do you juggle everything? Before we get into specifics.
Yeah, but before we ask that, maybe like not everybody watching this is going to know who Gabby is. So maybe
that's a good point.
For people who don't know anything about you, Gabby, can you quickly tell us a little bit about your background and what you do and where you came from? Is that okay?
That's a good one.
That's good. That's a good idea. What do you mean I'm not that famous?
I know. That's insulting, Duncan. I was assuming everybody knew.
Cool. Okay. So who am I and what do I do? So I'm Gabrielle Merite. That's the right way to pronounce my name in French. I'm from France. I live in the US in Los Angeles. And I usually say that I help change makers communicate their database insight for a better future through creative data storytelling, which pretty much mean I do like 3 things, which is like creative data campaigns, visual identities for organizations that have insights, digital data tools, and then I also do this thing called DataViz guidelines. That's like my new favorite product. And I've been working as an independent for 7 years, and soon to be founders of a design studio. It's official. I'm saying it out here. Soon it won't be just me coming in the next few months. This is like official. I have to hold myself accountable, so I have to start saying it out loud.
You heard it here first.
Is that and I have a background in science, for those who don't know science and scientific communication. That's where I started in like biology, healthcare, and now I'm doing all the data fun stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's great. I think, you know, if people want to know more about specific aspects of your background, they can always ask in the comments.
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, so lots of things that you're working on. How are you juggling your day? What is happening in Gabby land? How are you keeping it all together?
I do not balance. That's a statement. I have very little balance in my life, which is not an issue so much. So I have to state that I'm probably not the best example of work-life balance, which people imagine it being like you only work from 9 to 5. I definitely don't work just from 9 to 5, but I love what I do. I really, really love it. So I spend all my time doing what you would consider work, but for me it's just like everything I love, so it's not an issue. So I don't balance a lot. I do try to spend, so this client work, obviously that takes most of my time, and there's business work which takes also a lot of my time, like lead generation and admin things and marketing. However, I'm like blurring the boundaries of what business is and what my personal interests are. I think that's where I'm standing, meaning you could think of business as like a separate thing to do, like, oh, I need to produce content to get people in the door. It's not really how I see business. I see it more as like I want to share what I'm learning through this journey of working with like amazing people who are like has the best insight for like really building that like vision of a better world that we could all have, and learning from them, with them, working on those different data projects, and then sharing what I learned to the outside world. And look at me, that's great for marketing. But also it's hopefully helpful for not just like prospective client, but also like people in the field as a whole. And because I'm interested in everything data and understanding like behavior, I also start a lot of like for free things that don't really bring business, but to me feeds also my practice. So Effect and Affect, the newsletter, is one of those where I just always wanted to know about the research behind how do people really interact with communication? Because we have a better sense of like best practices in database and how to do good database, but like, do people even care? How do they really like relate to what we put in front of them? And that's obviously not something I make money out of, but to me, it's like it helps me do better work. That's my goal. So I don't balance nothing. I just do everything at once
and drop it all.
Good. It's all good. It's not an issue. I work on, I do try to like schedule things in my calendar. Don't get me wrong, that I'm organized about, and I stay on top of my project. Everything is always on time. I can say that out loud, but it's a bit of like my work life, my hobbies, everything is merging. It's all like one big mix match, and that works for me.
Do you feel like you trying to decide, like you wake up in the morning, try to decide what you're working on? Is it kind of like, okay, I got deadlines, but then also I'm just kind of following my passion and what I'm interested in? Because I kind of heard parts of that when you were talking about it. It's like, I'm doing it because I like doing it and I'm really interested in it.
Yes and no. I actually do this exercise of like weekly scheduling my week. I'm pretty good at this. So on Sundays or on Saturdays, depending, usually it's Sunday in the evening, I make a list of everything I have to do for the week. So deadlines to be matched with clients, proposal to send, also potentially things to look up to, things to post, things to create. And I block time in my calendar, and Duncan has pushed me to do that for a long time. So shout out to Duncan. And I actually have this great app. I'm not paid to say that, but I use this app called Motion. You may have seen, they've been advertising a lot. It's called App Motion. It's an AI generated thing, but it's like a calendar. And pretty much what you do is you can place the task you have to do, time, how long it would take you, and how would you want to split it. If it's split, like, do you want it to be in chunk or do you want it to be in one big task? Give it the final milestones on when it needs to be ready. And then it schedules your entire week, month, whatever you want. Taking into account like how long do you want between taxes, like breaks, taking into account your schedule, like all your schedules, like meetings and all that. It's awesome. It's changed how I work. It makes it way easier for me to block time and also get a sense of how do I block things. So I tend typically to like design project, I need like chunk of 4 hours. Like I'm not cutting that in an hour. So I tell him that. And then at the same time, I have a practice of like the email. I want to look at my email in the morning, in the evening. So it's 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening. And I always do it every day. So that's set up in advance. Then this meeting that happens, but allows me to like kind of move my day. And what I try to do is look at my calendar by half days. Half days are for kind of like the little task of like answering email, answering comments on LinkedIn, doing some like small business admin stuff. And then the half of the day is client work, where I do more like heads down. And some of my clients, in case they're listening, some of them are a bit more full-time, but they know I do the work. So if I have to do more design work, I'll do it in the evening because it's quiet, or I do it over the weekend. That's just how I work. I can't do 8 hours of designing anyway. It's not usually how my brain works. So I like to see it as like half days and put that when it's optimal for me to work, which is what I love about being independent.
I have a question sort of off the back of this. I think you talked about this a little bit already, but like so as you're growing this business and doing like so many different things, and then like as you sort of tend to move up things, your job becomes more and more like managing people and talking to people and pitching and creating things. So how do you maintain your like creative side of your practice, your inspiration, or just like practicing, to keep your sort of creative design muscles, like limber as you have more and more of your day be taken up by these other things?
That's interesting, because it almost feels like to me, I'm not losing it. I'm expanding where my creativity lands. Like I feel like I have creative talks with like, I've been creative in like discussing with larger client how we could even approach a project, or starting this new research-based newsletter, Effect and Affect. Like to me, it's actually maybe giving up on the things that have become a bit more mundane. Like I love designing, I would always love that, but I don't need to be there creating all the variants for UI, database dashboard for website. Like that's just like grinding on Figma for hours. I don't mind doing it. I'm pretty damn efficient at it, but it just doesn't make sense for me to be in charge of that anymore. I'd rather like put my time into like creative strategy, or even like strategy overall on how we approach the project. That's where I can be more creative and have more impact, where like the grinding is just technical, and I've been through it, and I think it's really important to go for it to fully own the software and the skill set, and then I can help somebody else get there and like, you know, teach people how to do that and get to that level and produce the right work, the vision I have set up for them. So I actually find I have a lot of fun finding, like, doing creatively differently in a way. And it's not about anymore, at least it's not about doing some, it's more about thinking. And I think that's also why my value is increasing, because that's harder to do in a way. Like it took me a long time to even feel comfortable saying I can do strategy.
Do you think that ties into the reason why you want to start an agency? Because there's a lot of people like, why not just stay an independent freelancer and kind of just taking on these projects end to end? What was your thought process on that?
Exactly that. Currently, still today, a lot of my projects, people come to me and they want like a designer who can execute their vision. And it was great for the longest time. Don't get me wrong. I love it. Like I can produce the best work. I'm like, it's a specific style. But now it's more, I've also, because of my research around like behavior science and like how does user really work, I start spotting issues like that are too late to fix when they get to you as a designer. So they get to you and they're like, we want to do a social media campaign. Here's the data we want to do. And here's the story. And I'm like, whoa. This is the wrong story for your audience, guy. Like, have you really thought through that? Like, it's just going to be misinterpreted, and it's not about the quality of the design or even the data. It's just like the approach from the get-go is just off. And it's the positioning that I have as an independent designer is that I'm going to be the last one contacted, and it's too late to change the plan. And more and more I like have to rework, and I've reworked the process. And we've done that a lot. Like recently we published the updated version of the American Opportunity Index. There was an existing website that worked nicely, but there was a bunch of challenges with it. And they just wanted a quick refresh. Like, we're just gonna like make it slightly more branded and slightly more like cool to look at. And then when we were doing that, I realized we had a user experience problem. Like people could not understand the insight. It was really hard to use, and Duncan worked with me on this. And so I said, hey, we
testing.
We did user interviews and then user testing, and then reworked everything from the get-go, like from scratch, start from zero. The data sets are also updated, which will lead to a bigger thing. And it's one of those that I love doing that. And I just wish I was involved earlier in the process. And that's something you can only do when you're seen as a strategist and not an executioner of like, I'm just a really good designer that would find the right solution. Yeah.
I had a quick question. I know that we've got a question in the chat, but just before we get to that, because I think they're kind of related, I just want to ask you, based on sort of, you were talking about what you find it useful to do and what you find it less useful to do these days. How do you approach collaboration with other people? Be they clients, be they people working for you, be they people at the same level as you on a project but working on a different part of that project. How do you handle those relationships?
Could you reformulate in a way that's a little more precise? Like, what do you mean by how do you approach those?
so I guess like how do you like to work with people is really the kind of top level question.
It's an interesting question because I don't think we think about it often. To me, I really want to work with people as equal. Like, I'm not here to tell you how to do things like client work. I think there's this weird relationship sometimes where we either like at the bottom and we just execute, or sometimes there's a bit of like egocentricness that happens within you. Like, we're going to tell you exactly how it is. To me, it's not like that. Like, clients come in with their own expertise and they know the data set better than me, and they'll know the audience way better than me, and I can help them, but I'm here as like a guide, but they know the answer. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just helping them find the answer. So that's how I see it, like most as equal partner. And it's the same with collaborators, honestly. So I love to work with people. And it's actually tough to find because I work with like a lot of the collaborators I work with are developers, for instance, and they're used to being at the end. They're even more at the end than designer, because designer do the work and then they just like drop it on them. And then the dev is like, that's not going to work. like code wise. And I found that super frustrating. And they're surprised when I come in being like, is this going to work earlier in the project, or do I need to like deliver the format in another way? And I found that they have a really hard time even telling me what they need because they've never been asked the question. So to me, it's like that's the kind of also of setting I would like to set up as the agencies. I get to pick who I want to work with, and I work with them in a way that's like they involve earlier in the process and the opinion matter and the expertise matters more. They're not just going to execute a vision. And some people don't mind it. Don't get me wrong. Some people want to be just executing. But to me, you get the best work out of people when they feel free to like express their opinion and give you the best of the expertise. So that's how I want to build it. And that's why currently we'll see. I might hire more like junior designer, but have a harder time with it because usually they're not there yet where they can fully express an expertise because it's just still learning. And it's like that's the one that I'm still balancing today is how do I let them express themselves while also like teaching them certain processes that need to happen for the project to succeed.
Yeah, I mean, this brings us really well to the question that Elsie asked, which is when you are hiring people, what are the main things that you look for in applicants?
There's two things. This skill set. Usually I'm looking for like a very specific skill set. So for instance, like if I need, like right now I have a project that may happen and it may involve development. So I'm looking for a very specific skill set of somebody who can do development, storytelling style with data, and has a good design eye. So there's like a certain level of skill that you need to have as a threshold in certain field. It's hard to find just that. And then it's a personality match. It's straight up personality field. It's like if you can work with me or not. And I'm pretty chill, but some people they just there's some
Can
people
you stand me?
yeah, it's like can you handle my high energy way of speaking? Are you down to like Slack? Because I'm a lot of like Slack chat. That's just how I roll. Are you not going to offend it if I text you? I don't text people on their phone. It's always on Slack, so you can turn everything off. But I might send stuff at Sunday because that's when I organize the week, and I want you to ignore it. But like if I just think it's a personality fit of like what's your energy like, and do you share the same values? Quite important. Like I think I love my job and I want to encourage people who love their job and haven't been encouraged in certain directions. So to me, it's like finding people who are really passionate about their work. And I just feel also that like I work with independent and they tend to be passionate when otherwise they end up in-house where they do a 9 to 5 and it's easy enough and they're happy. And I have no problem with that. But when I work with people that I specialize in expertise, usually they're passionate about what they do. And that's kind of what I'm looking for.
Yeah, it sounds like you're looking for someone who is really skilled at the craft, but also has a strong desire to grow themselves. Do you think so?
I think of them as a T-shape people. So you want people that like T vertically that are very niche down in the expertise skill set that they have, gender diversity. And that to me is not optimal. Like I want people that are curious because they do better work if they're actually curious about the human impact that their work could have. And at the same time, sometimes people are very generalist. They're curious about everything, but their skill set's not honed yet. They haven't get to that point where they're really expert in the technical expertise they have. And that's also not a great match at this stage of the studio and what I want to build. Later down we'll see, but for now it's not what I'm looking. I'm looking for the perfect T for every like collaborator.
How do you think someone would be able to show that to you that they're a T?
Having done a lot of interviews, not for the studio, but even for like other studios, like I've interviewed a bunch of people at Pentagram, at like other places. I think it comes down to the skill set. The vertical is usually the work itself. Like your portfolio speaks for itself, like the quality itself on how technically correct you are. Like we can spot if even for a developer, I can spot if you can code right or not because it looks a certain way. Like, and if you have a design eye, and then the horizontal is the interview process. So sometimes I had a really interesting case. So I was hiring a junior recently, and I was looking for somebody who was more in a junior, but really good at Figma already, like pretty advanced, because I was going to do a lot of like components and stuff like that for big database guideline projects. And somebody who was pretty proficient already, but junior, they didn't even have to be in database. That wasn't required. And I had like 5 interviews and they were all great. So I selected on the portfolio, all great. And I actually had a couple where I felt like the portfolio was a bit on the low end of like what I wanted, but they but I was curious about their approach, like the way they presented things was interesting when they sent even the portfolio through, or how they described themselves. And also they had other soft skills, like they had managed a team, they were transitioning, so they were managing people, or they were used to client work, so they could be client facing. Like they had different skills that were kind of interesting. And there was one person that came recommended, and he was really good, like in design. And when I saw his portfolio, I was like, oh, he's gonna be the one. It was beautiful. He obviously was proficient. And then I had the interview with him, and it was not. He was good, but he was like salesy, and he just went on and rolled through his portfolio for 45 minutes, didn't ask any question. And I was like, that's a bad personality fit. You know, I was like, you're obviously very talented, but I don't think, because also it was kind of a junior position, I was like, I don't think you'll learn. I don't think you'll be open to learning because you're already like very happy with where you're at. And to me, that was a big like no. And at the same time, somebody else that I almost hired and didn't in the end, her portfolio was not there because she's transitioning in database. And mainly that was the thing that blocked to me, is like she wasn't there in Figma, and I need somebody that was very proficient in Figma, but her presentation was super on point. Like I was really impressed. I was like, I almost hired her. I was like, you don't have the skill, but like the way you think of things is perfect. And even her designs were not visually at the level they should be, but when she explained it, it made sense. Like she could totally explain her vision, even though you couldn't totally see it.
So explaining her vision and like how she got there and her decision-making process.
And her decision-making was really clear when she explained it. She was like, this is why I picked this. And the execution was lacking a little bit, but the vision was totally there. And I was like, in a year or two, you'll be there and I'll hire you. Right now, I just can't afford it. I'm a small studio. I can't afford to take that much of a risk. I just needed somebody that was like a little more advanced already. But it was, yeah, I would love to have that person. I won't say they in the Elevate group, they recognize themselves, but I was like, next time, because
you're close.
And to prove that sometimes, like you may not be the best in design, but like your who you are and how you see things can be really important.
Yeah, and how you explain things too. That's soft skill stuff. That stuff is really important.
It should be listed. I feel like it should be listed at the top of CVs now. Like that should be the like main criteria.
But it's really, yeah, I think it can be really hard to show those skills sometimes, right?
Yeah.
It's very easy to show someone a portfolio and be like, well, I coded this website, so obviously I can code. But like, how would a person show you that, like that they have those really important soft skills that you're looking for?
I actually think it's not that hard once you have the interview, or even when you send the PDF. Like I think like the language you use, like I've seen when I present portfolio, people just send me stuff like free case studies. They're not related. It's like, here is free stuff. And there's like nothing to it. And some of them rework, and that's how I like to present my work too, is they rework in a way that's like, here's my main approach, and here's like free project that shows that. And let me walk you through the logic of it. And I think that's how you show those, like, this is strategical thinking. Or if you work with people, I can tell right away if you're actually a good collaborator or not, because you created people. Sorry, I'm sorry. You created people. That's a big one. Like, I feel like most people just don't. They put no name. And it's like, you work for the studio and you don't put it in. Like, who was the creative director?
Like the acknowledgements of who did what?
And when they present, they do the same. When they present, they do the same. They're like, here's the thing. I did this part and somebody else did this part. And that shows me that they're going to be good at collaborating. And if you ask them, they'll be like, they speak in the we tone. They'll be like, well, we sat down and here's what I did. Because they do have to take, credit for what they did. But like, we sat down, we go through this and this. And that's how you show it. And to be honest, there's no cheating that. Like it'll come naturally if that's how you work. I'll see it right away. So you can train it, obviously, but I think it's more like how you express the work. And that shows a lot in like communication skills and collaboration skills.
We've got another great question in the chat. Yeah, thanks for putting it up, Ali. This is from Julie, who's one of the newest members of Elevate. Welcome, Julie. And she's asking, regarding portfolios, if my portfolio is almost all passion projects, because I'm just starting out, how is that viewed by employers?
I love to hear actually all of you guys take. So we'll do a little circle. I'll start, but it's absolutely not an issue. Like it's not a problem at all. I've seen it many times, especially for like junior position, like starting position or even client work, it's not so much of an issue, especially if you had a brief on your passion project, like you made a brief with constraint to yourself. People understand that when you're starting out, you're not going to have big clients. Big client names help, don't get me wrong, but if the project is good, the project is good. Again, I think it depends on what you're expecting, what level you're looking at. But if you're looking at just starting a career and you're starting at the junior position or just getting client, we're not expecting you to have work with the big guys in this world. Like, it takes time. So
it's almost
not
a
an
little
issue at
bit
all.
suspicious if you have, like, you know, if you're like applying for an entry level position and you've got like case studies with like Nike and Pentagram and things like that.
That would
And
be,
it's like,
would be like,
why are you applying to this job?
I've seen
Yeah.
it sometimes. I've seen
yeah, because
interns.
you're trying to look a certain way, but then it just
I've seen,
backfires.
I've seen interns from like big art university in the US putting those names because they have interns, but like they really worked on like a tiny version and they show you the whole like final case study, beautiful stuff that was a share team with no credit and no explaining what they do. And I'm like, that seems wrong. There's a balance here. It depends on the level, but if you just started, you have to start somewhere. And to me, it's like the more project you have, the better at the beginning, and then you have to select what you want to show that's like the highest quality.
Yeah,
And
I think
yeah, go on, Will.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say the employers part of that question is very key, because I think if you're applying for a job, like Gabby said, at like a company, and it's, you know, assuming it's more of an entry level or junior position, then yeah, no problem at all, because that's what people expect.
Yep.
If employers is actually clients, then it's trickier, because it really is tricky with clients that it does help to have those names, because what a client is looking for is like, oh, you've worked for another big brand or something. And so they can have the confidence that like someone else made this decision and they were happy. My money will be invested well. It's not going to get screwed up. So that is where there's a little bit of a difference there.
But that's... to be fair, there's a workaround that. First, I always tell people like you should probably put in a couple years in agency work or in-house. I actually think you'll learn a bunch from that in general if you don't already have a career in it, because then you can connect the dots. Like you can work for your current employer and make proper project for them, even though it's not your main job. And also you can work for design studios that are looking for people that will hire juniors. Like you can always, even as a freelance, like I know a couple of studios that do hire juniors even as freelancers, just for like, you know, smaller project that they need a cheaper, like lower cost of workforce than like that field. So there's an in between. But yes, to your point, if you're trying to go direct client, it helps to have names.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling on this, well, I mean, I can tell you what I do, which is that even though I've been freelancing for 14 years at this point, originally in journalism and more recently, I think for 6 or 7 years now in data viz, I still have like personal projects in my portfolio. And it's not because I haven't got around to updating my portfolio, which you might think. it's because those projects are the ones that I'm proudest of. You know, I'm really, I want to show these off to people because they show who I am, the way I like to, you know, do things when I'm not restricted by budgets. I'm not restricted by client demands and things like that. Like this is my crystalline perfect vision of what I want a project to be, and that's the thing I'm most proud of.
Yeah, I actually applied for a data viz job, data viz designer, my first data viz designer job, maybe like 6 years ago, 2018. Yeah, like I said, 6 years. And I had 4 pieces in my portfolio, and they were all personal projects. And I got a job. So even though I was kind of more mid-career, because I had been working already for like 10 years, data viz jobs are very unique in that they're very kind of new. So having someone who's like, oh, I'm a data viz designer and I've been doing it for 14 years, like that's actually pretty rare. So usually
I haven't been doing data viz for 14 years.
Okay, maybe 10, even 10. I mean, that's pretty rare. So I think the pool of people that are applying that have so much client work in their portfolio is actually pretty small. So I don't think you're going to stand out a lot by having personal projects in your portfolio. I think that's pretty common for data viz jobs, just because they're still pretty rare.
Yeah, certainly not stand out in a bad way.
Yeah.
It's a good point too, both of you are making, about most of us have a career. Actually, all of us here had a career before data viz, and that's the norm in our field.
Yeah.
And that has a value too. And it's not a project that you can show, but it's something you can flaunt in a way, because that means potentially you were a manager, you like pretty much like I think Duncan, and then Will a bit, like you have a background, maybe actually I know Will, you from biology too, like you have a specific like expertise in a specific scientific field, that so you're used to like reading research papers and looking at data sets, so you're not just a designer. Or maybe you have worked in communication, like me and Duncan, like you work in journalism, so you have a good sense on how to tell a story, and that's valid too, you know, like it's a balance of skills, and when you merge that, you get the perfect person.
You know, if you're thinking, oh, you know, I haven't developed my tea enough, like that original career absolutely can be your tea.
Yeah, you've already started digging.
You know what? It's still valuable to this day. It's still valuable. I almost got a job. People know here that I said no eventually, and I think part of the reason why they liked me is I had the background in science and biology and human healthcare and stuff like that, and it was what it did. So it's like exactly what I've worked with cancer and virology and fun stuff when I was in like more like research side of thing. And so I was very comfortable with that topic of like what the data is behind, how the clinical trials are made. And so even it's been 10 years now that I haven't like worked in that field specifically. Like I do database for them sometimes, but I don't work as a researcher or even a scientific journalist. And it still serves today. It still speaks to what they do. They feel better because like, I'm sure it happens to you, Will, with like all the biology stuff, and then Duncan with like climate related topic. It's like, oh, he understands what we mean by this technical jargon and those really complex data.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to switch gears a little bit and ask you, Gabby, how do you judge the success of what you're doing?
Damn, Duncan.
Drop the bomb.
Everybody's least favorite question.
Okay. I think there's 3 things, and one of them currently is missing, in my opinion, from my work, actually, which makes me dissatisfied. The first one is how happy is my client? And like I think sometimes as designer or creatives, we judge on the quality of like the result, like the visual result. But to me, it's like, if they're happy, I'm happy. That's my priority in my business. If they think it's a good project, then it's a good project, even if it's not exactly what I wanted. That's one. The second one is the actual final result. So I definitely judge on like, is the visual at the standard that I want to reach? And I'm lucky enough that I got the freedom at Pentagram as an independent to like get those projects that I feel like I can fully embrace the vision I have for creativity and propose really creative solution, and they adopted. And that for me is a really big success. The third one is the one that today I'm struggling with. And this is what I want to, also why I wanted to create the agency so I can offer this to my client, is I want to be more thoughtful about how we measure the success. How can we put like KPI, like metrics on the project, and metrics that are maybe not about so much, you know, how many views did you get, but did people actually take action? Did people actually change their mind about this topic? It's not feasible on every project, but I get the sense that if you do it right and you put a little more thought even in the initial workshop, and that's something that I'm actually really excited to be offering now, is like actually looking a bit more like how do people interact with data and having those more like in-depth audience research. I would love to be able to put some metrics in there, even if it's just like not really, it's a let's say qualitative rather than quantitative result. That's like the missing third one that I think I would love to have. But already the first two of like how happy is the client and how happy I am with the result, and that's like the main one. And by the way, in clients, I'm putting clients, but on the longer term, it'll be team. I think it'll be important for me that people who I work with are also happy with working with me. That's like as important as the client being happy. Because what's the point of having a happy client if you're exploding your freelancers and everybody's hating you? Oh, you don't pay
starting
them.
over every project with a new team.
Yeah, I think that's go on, Will.
I was gonna say I think it's important what Gabby, the last question, like Gabby said, is something that people definitely do already in this field, because when you're thinking about like quantitative or like how do I actually measure the success, if you go for that metric of like page views or how many times it was shared on social or something, it's almost always going to be like a losing game with these types of projects that we do, because they're so big and in-depth. Like I'm thinking about it from the perspective of journalism, but it applies anywhere, that like if your goal is to maximize page views, the truth is that you can make little bite-sized content that's pretty low effort that you know is going to get a lot of page views. And a project where you really are putting in huge effort and data and something and working on it for months, like the hours invested to page views ratio is never going to work out in your favor. But typically, like, people have whole systems for tracking these things, at least in journalism, which is called like impact measurement, where they do things like collect, like which important people, like influential decision makers saw this and shared it, or like, was there actually action taken? Sometimes, it led years down the road to like congressional investigations or changes in laws, or even just like emails you got from people who read it and said, this was really amazing, it changed my mind, or I learned something new. So basically collecting like the high quality responses that you get rather than just the amount of responses you get is a really good way to start measuring that.
It's also particularly relevant in the field of policy, where I work with like think tank and people like that, where their audience is not like the general audience. It's not so much about like movement work than it is about like reaching the right politician or the right policymaker to get a law, and it might take years, to your point. So and that, I think, is more valuable, like measuring that, and they know those people, like that's the specialty, that's all they do is that contact with those policymakers and providing them the right info. And it's funny because we've heard recently in France we passed a law that is considering, follow me here, I'm not too sure, you'll have to double check what I'm saying, but they just passed a law that puts nature as like a protected, like it's like considered like a protected nature. Duncan, you probably know about this better than me, but it took a long time to pass, and they almost failed. If you listen to the interview, they almost failed because they said they didn't have the evidence that they needed to show that it like nature is like almost like a being and it's important. And what's striking is that we have all the evidence, we just haven't communicated the right way. And so a success, for instance, for this kind of thing would be like, we provided a campaign towards policymakers that made them bridge that gap between I don't have enough information with actually I have the information, it's been communicated to me the right way, and it's the right choice to pass this law and vote for it. And that's a success.
And also at the right time. Like, that's the crucial thing too. Yeah. It needs to be at the right point in the electoral cycle. It needs to be, not early on when people are completely overwhelmed with this new job that they've got, but, not so late that all they're thinking about is the next election. And so they're back in short-term mode. It's like, it's such a difficult thing to do. But there are absolutely projects where the audience you're making something for is one person.
Exactly that. And I think sometimes they're the most efficient one, because it's that one person that holds the key to the castle, that has the power. I'm also thinking about like database guidelines, for instance, which is, people think of it as like, well, you can measure, maybe you could put proper metrics of like how many hours did we save by providing guidelines, so people don't have to like play with colors forever. Now they have a really clear direction. You can measure that. But you can also measure the stress of the team, like how stressed out are you about database nowadays? And to me, that's a soft metrics. And Danmol, he's an expert in design system. He talks about that a lot, about the different metrics. And he talks about stress frequently and how design system reduce the stress because there's less guessing. And that's hard to measure. You can probably do a survey, but it's more qualitative, I think, in general. But to me, it's like even better than saving them hours. It's like you made the experience of the workplace a better place to be in by adding those tools and those guidance, and that's incredible as an impact. And it's hard to measure, but it's worth it.
It's kind of reminds me of what you were talking about towards the beginning about being able to provide value. Because if you think about, says, okay, I will do a style guide for you and charge $5,000 for it, and I will deliver it and see you later. But if you're like, look, we were going to move this metric, we're going to move this metric, and then we're going to move this metric, and I'm not going to stop working until we have moved those up to a mutually agreed upon amount. And so even if it is a survey, you'd be like, okay, we just sent the survey and like the team feels 98% stressed or something. And then you deliver it and they feel 60% stressed. And then you tweak it again so that you can bring it down to the 30% that you agreed on. And then they feel like, wow, this was really worth our time and our money because we really see the effect that it has had on our team. So the metrics is super, super powerful in terms of providing value.
If you want to see someone else talking about this and you're an Elevate member, you should go back into our archives and look for the interview we did with Moritz Stefana. He talks about this process in the interview that we did. It was a couple of years ago, I think now, but still hugely relevant today.
Yeah, I'll find a link in a second. Let's see. D-Ray had a question. I vaguely remember you saying something recently about not wanting to be thought of as a freelancer instead preferring being a woman-owned business. Can you discuss that a bit? And then maybe I read about you saying it. I don't remember exactly, just kind of stuck in my brain. I wanted to hear more of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's kind of what we discussed a little earlier in the episode. And it's woman-owned is just like, it happens to be woman-owned. It's more by like, I'm thought of as a business and like as a founder of a business. I think that's more important. Woman-owned happens to be who I am. So it's an adjective, but it's not really like the main, just clarifying that this is not like the like most important part of the switch. So freelancers are guns for hired. When you're a freelancer, there's a point of view that the client has that they're getting one person, usually, that this person is going to execute their vision. And then they're usually highly technically skilled and they might be expensive, but there's less of an expectation that you're going to be involved in strategy and propose something that's like from A to Z rather than just the execution. Whereas if you're business and again, I think you should always think about yourself as a business, by the way. Like that's almost, even if you're freelancer, you're a business, you pay taxes, you have to do admin, marketing, invoices. So you are still a business. I think it's more for the point of view of the client. If you're an agency, it involves potentially having several people. If it's one person like me who is going to have more of a flexible agency, so hire freelancers to support, it means you can provide more of a team service where you can do a project from A to Z, including not just the design, but the strategy, the delivery, maybe even like afterwards, like the implementation of the project. If you do database guideline, what does that mean on the longer term? It's not just about dropping the guidelines and be like, bye, done, you guys handle it. It's like helping them figure out where is the best place to put this guideline so that it's available. Who do we need to do a quarterly check-in to make sure that, people understand the guidelines, know how to use it. How do we evolve that in time? And that's something that's harder to sell as a freelancer because they see you as a one-off, highly expert person. So it's a positioning problem.
Yeah.
And they rarely expect you to come in with a team or even like collaborators. Sometimes they'll ask you, but most of the time they'll be like, we need a dev. I'll go get a dev on my own.
I have a question about, so thinking about this, like designing your business strategy or your pitch to people, how do you go about finding the right level of niche when you're advertising your business? Because, we know that it's important to have some niche. You can't just be like, I do everything. But at the same time, you want to have like, you are a multi-talented person who can do many different things. And you don't want to be thought of as just like, oh, this is just the person who does collage style infographics. So
there's so many ways of approaching it, and I think it depends on who you are and how you sing your work. To me, it's kind of like the teething at the business level. And it's like the vertical is not so much actually about what you do, like technically what you produce, but the products. So what are the main core products that you offer? And to me, it's super easy because I've been doing it for so long. So there's the database guideline product and design system. It goes hand in hand. Usually they do the guidelines first and then they'll come back for design system if they have digital needs. There's the creative campaigns, and that can be social media, digital storytelling, but it's all under a big umbrella called creative campaign, because usually it's campaigning for impact. And then the third one on my end is more like digital data tools, so platform like American Opportunity Index or the World Bank JEDON data portal, where it's more like a portal. There's a lot of UI involved. And those are products, and that's the specification. It almost doesn't matter how I do it, like technically the design software I'm using, it's about the product and the deliverables. And then I think there's like the industry you serve, right? And to me, it's pretty wide there because it's more about like, is your product have impact? And so that can be from social impact, creative campaigns for like general audience, to policymakers, to for database guideline, more an impact on your team. how can we support your team and help them be faster, more efficient, and also more relaxed when it comes to making data viz. So that's kind of like the T I'm thinking of. I think sometimes people think about niche like I need to be in one industry. Maybe it works for some people. I think there's a place for that. But to me, it's really about finding the core product that's like the thing you can serve every time. There's such a clear process, you know exactly the step, and you can repeat it regardless of the industry, regardless of like almost the data you served. It's like it's always the same process and the result is different, but it's like a core product. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think like that's a good point about the industry. I think it depends a lot on what you're offering and like how much demand there is for that, because you know the truth is like what we offer is very important, but like there's less demand for that than there are for just like design in general, right? Or like, you know, if you're a management consultant, maybe you do just want to be niched into like, I only work in healthcare because I'm super specialized, because that's such a huge, massive field. So it helps to be even more niched. But yeah, I think thinking of the product as the niche is a good way to do that.
And I'm assuming there's a place for industry even within that. Like I'm thinking of Eli Holder, so my collaborator on Effect and Affect, and his niche is he does data viz more. He doesn't do big digital data platform. He's more into like just data visualization, and he's niche in the public healthcare, like in general industry, and that's because he knows this topic by heart. He knows exactly how the data is. He knows exactly what kind of like dashboard they need, and the cognitive bias that the audience have, or the typical mistake that people do when they approach these data sets. And that's not my niche. Like I would never be able to provide that kind of service for them. It's not my product, but it's also like not a field that I know enough that I would be fully proficient to help. Like I can do creative campaigns for like pharmaceutical things, or, you know, raising awareness on specific disease to raise funds, but not really on like technical clinical trial data sets. So he has both an industry and a product.
Yeah, we had a really great discussion about this at my office hours. You, me, Gabby, and some other people elevators who came. We talked about niche, and you brought up the point that your niche is kind of built out of the value that you bring to your client. So you're connecting the dots and being like, hey, I don't just make an infographic. I can make an infographic to XYZ, and that value. Being able to say what that value is kind of helps you niche down so people understand, okay, is this for me or is this not for me? Because that's what niching is. It's like you are serving a subset of people. And also that intersection of your value plus maybe where you kind of have an unfair advantage. Like you were just saying with Eli, like he already has a background in this topic. So he knows the language, he knows what they're talking about, he knows what their problems are. So sometimes starting with where you have an unfair advantage and then kind of coupling that with, you know, maybe the skill that you want to do every day, and connecting the dots for the clients that this is how I bring value and how can change your business. And you end up with a nice niche.
Yeah. I have a contentious take that Will's going to hate me for, but I think it's almost unethical to not niche down somehow, because trying to serve everyone, meaning you can't, if you're not developing an expertise, and I'm saying that Will not knowing that that's not what you're doing, but I know he's like, I don't niche down, but you just don't know about it. You have specific products. It's just, I feel like it's unethical if you're like, you know what, I can do everything data, from Power BI to infographics to digital. There's no way you're that good. I mean, unless you have 1,000 employees and, you know, 6 different teams, that some agency can provide that. But as a solo person, I'm like, if you're doing that, probably you are giving them 50% of the quality they should get. And that to me is unethical.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. It's more less about saying I do or don't niche, and more about saying how do you define what a niche is, or like how you are niching, to your point. So, you know, yeah. I mean, I do that today when I talk to people for freelancing stuff. I'll tell them, like, sometimes I get inquiries for like development, you know, because I do code and I have coded things in the past, but I'll usually tell people now, like, hey, I can do that for you if you really want, but like that's not my specialty. Like I really am much more expertise in this area, and you'll get a lot more efficiency out of it that way. So I think that's a good point about defining what it means to have a niche.
Yeah, choosing what you want to do is a niche too, right?
Right, exactly. Yes, and I do tell them I will not do Tableau or Power BI or any of that, because I had to do it one time in my life and never again. So
you've niched.
yes.
We have one more question in the chat, and then we should start thinking about wrapping up. Desiree says, can you talk about striking a balance between niching down and responding to the needs of your market? I mean, is your market your niche? What do you think about that?
Fascinating. I think it depends on how do you define your market. Because if it's people, specifically large organization, they might have more needs that you cannot answer. And that's when you need to send recommendation to other people. And this is the strength. This is also what's exciting about Elevate and us. It's like what you guys don't know, maybe listening to podcasts, is we send work to each other all the time. I was DMing Duncan last night being like, can you take this client? Because he's not the right client for me. He needs somebody who can do very specific things that I don't usually offer. And also he's at the point where he's not ready for the big budget yet. So, or for the big database guideline that I'm trying to sell. So I'm like, Duncan is like highly technical. He'll provide the best services for what you can afford today, which is hopefully good enough for Duncan. And we pass work on.
I haven't had the email yet, people. So
yeah, I haven't sent the email yet. So I'll get there. I was checking if he was interested from the get-go. But it's about, I think that's the thing, is like the needs. I think you need to identify what the needs are, because if you decide to niche down and like doing, I don't know, data pottery, it might work out. But if there's absolutely no need ever, then you're just not going to find clients like that. So you need to kind of identify. It's less about the need, that like what are the challenges that people are meeting that your skill set will help them with. I think this is what's happened. But then that doesn't mean that if they need more, you need to provide the solution. You can just give them the right person that will answer their problem. That's not you. And I think that's the strength of having such a network and being like in this big field of design and database, is that there's so many technical skills here, like Tableau people, Power BI, digital scrolling, telling people, creative, more like social media things. And you're like, you know what? You're looking for even stylistic, like you're looking for illustration and it's hand-drawn. That's not what I do. Go see Ali. And it's like, I'd be happy to make you a recommendation. We just send work through. And I think it serves the client better. Like everybody's happy, your client's happy, and they'll come back to you when they need you. It's not ethical to keep that client and serve them with something that they just not like, that's not what they wanted,
I think there's something to be said about the responding to the needs of the market, though, about like always, like you can not reinvent, but you're right, we're always learning and expanding things, right? So if you see like, okay, all of a sudden there's this shift in the market and like everything now has to be hand-drawn data viz, but I've never done that before. Everybody got into this field by learning, like not knowing this and then learning it, right? So you just repeat the same process, right? You do some personal projects with some hand-drawn things, and then you can put them in your portfolio or on your website, whatever you're selling to people. And then you get that first project from a client that's for a hand-drawn, and then like you execute it well, and bam, now all of a sudden you have like something to sell to people to say, I offer this product as well. I'm also this. And so you're expanding your niche into that new area, if that's something you want to do.
Yeah, if that's what you want to do. Follow your passion, especially if the market's saying we want it.
Yeah, you just have to go about it in such a way that, right, you're not just like selling something fake. You're really training and learning and purposefully expanding your niche into this area.
And I think the flip side of that, and we'll probably talk about this quite a lot more when it becomes my turn to be in the hot seat, is creating a market around your niche.
Yes. And actually, okay, to me, it's like identifying a market. They just don't know that they need you yet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's about that bigger problem. Like database guideline is not a really big market today, to be honest. Like there's very little people that even realize that exists, that they need it. And like you have to help them realize what the gaps is. It's all about like making them identify that, hey, there's a gap and we're struggling with this. And then like, wait, does somebody does this? Like, is that a thing? And for you, Duncan, I'm assuming it's certification stuff.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
But it makes sense, right? Because like so much evidence showing that sound is a great way to convey, like to get people to like memorize. Yeah. And I'd love to hear.
See, people,
like,
it's working. Gabby's repeting it.
Yeah. I mean, also like I posted about this recently in Affect and Affect. So I want to shout out to you.
I mean, you got Walmart to do a sonification. So I think that's a pretty great example of like, making it happen.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Absolutely.
It's not about creating a market. To me, it's really about highlighting the problems that this market has that they may not have even seen themselves. That's the trick.
Yeah. It's like, you've asked for this solution. Here's what this solution is going to do. Here's what it's not going to do. Here's what we could do instead.
Yeah, I think it comes back to the value that we're talking about. You have a way to tell them this is the value of the project. So if you would like that value, this is how we can achieve it. And this is the thing I can do for you.
Yeah, definitely. I have one last question for you, Gabby, which, and you're not allowed to answer with the word work. I'm going to say, how do you switch off?
That's not fair.
I mean, you literally started this interview by saying that you work 24 hours a day.
I work quite a bit. I garden. So what you guys don't know is I have a jungle inside. It's growing. I just moved. It's been 4 months. I'm going back my jungle for those who don't know, I used to have 200 plants and plus in one apartment before I moved to New York. So I'm building back my jungle. This is my like deep love for like greenery, and I have a yard now, guys. So I spend sometimes outside using my hands and turning off my brain. That's not true. I listen to podcasts about business while I garden, but it's close enough.
And you said you were training for a marathon too?
Oh yeah, I work out quite a bit. I have this thing about like sometimes, you know, I sit all day in this desk. I stand too because I have a standing desk, but the physical health for me is such, if I don't have physical, like if I don't physically move, I get really sick mentally. And that's always been the case. So getting that line. So I'm training for a marathon. I just ran 15K and I suffered yesterday, 2 days ago, as training. I used to, now it's like I'm a little older and it's been a bit more tough. And I do a bunch of weird gymnastic stuff. And that's also play. And it's play with that business and play with people too. And it's just like becoming a child a little bit, like just playing with your body and doing weird stuff on weird gymnastic apparatus, like dancing. Yeah, it's pretty special. And to me, like that soul of like child play is really important. And it's something that I will never, same than gardening, like monetize. I think some people tend to have hobbies and try to monetize that. And I never want to monetize any of those gardening, working out thing, or even make it a competition. Like I do half marathon just for fun, to push myself a little bit and to, you know, to force myself to get there and train and like, you know, otherwise I get a little lazy, but it's fundamentally play. I don't want to make it a competition. Like I do that enough in my work that I don't have to do that in my hobbies.
No achieving anything. It's just about the activity.
It's all fun. And it's like, yes, you want to make progress. You want to do specific weird things, standing on the line above nothing, but it's not ever like comparing yourself to others, or it's like also having a lot of compassion if you don't reach there for your body, and like really like focusing on like how I feel about things, like physically. It's great. It's like, I think my therapist called it like active meditation, because I can't meditate. I can't sit down for 20 minutes, you guys. It's not happening. But he was like, sounds like you active meditating when you're running. And I'm like, yes.
That's when you have found you can get into a flow state, is when you're doing gardening or doing something with your hands. Totally.
Yeah. It's amazing. And hopefully it keeps my body also like, I want to age well. So I'm hoping it protects my joints.
100%.
I'm scared. I'm not 20 anymore.
I'm glad you're finding time to have things outside of work. That was a good question, Duncan. And I really
put it in my calendar. It's blocked in my calendar, non-negotiable.
Your AI calendar.
Well, thanks, Gabby. Thanks for being in the hot seat today and sharing all the interesting stuff about the agency and building a niche and everything. Really, really fascinating. And if you have any questions about anything we talked about today, definitely post it in the Slack, and Gabby would be happy to jump in, right, Gabby?
Always. And in a couple of weeks, I think Duncan is going to have the hot seat. Sounds like that was...
A couple of weeks. Didn't we say we were going to do this quarterly?
No, it's going to happen.
We can do a quick series. We'll see.
I'll do it, sorry.
Oh, and Gabby is keynoting the opening keynote at Outlier with Eli Holder, and they're going to be talking about your research around I don't know, you can describe it better than me, but
You just look it up. It's called Effect and Affect. So effectaffect.org or ff.org. Both of them works with 4 Fs. And yeah, by the way, because we're talking about that, this is a shout out to Julie. Talk about passion project. Effect and Affect is a passion project. Zero money involved, just me and Eli nerding out on behavioral science stuff. And it got us the keynote at Outlier, which I'm very excited about.
Oh, cool. That's great information. Yeah. So this passion project got seen by the committee at Outlier.
We pitched it, yeah. I mean, we pitched the talk at Outlier, and they were like super excited, and that's when they were like, "You can have the keynote." And passion project, like it's not. It was just it's something that we both really passionate about. So, and hopefully, it connects to the business, but just to show that you can still get there with passion projects.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, you got to put yourself out there to be seen and have people know about the things that you're doing. So that's great. Yeah. So definitely grab an Outlier ticket. You can be there in person. It's in Chicago, right?
Chicago,
In June 2024.
14.
Yeah, it's something like that. It's mid-June. Or you can do virtual. They have virtual tickets. I'll be there virtually supporting you, Gabby, from afar.
I'm going to be by myself. Please come say hi if you're Outlier, so I don't feel alone.
If you're there, find Gabby and say hi. Okay. Thanks for joining us today. If you have any follow-up questions, you can join Elevate Database community at elevatedatabase.com. We would love to have you as a member. All right. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.